Swamiji, and it's wonderful to be here. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the atmosphere that surrounds the song that I was given, that was the second to last one you sang. I must admit, when I read the gospel and I read the translation of the songs, it doesn't mean a lot to me, and it feels like the poetry is lost in the translation somewhere. And so, but I also realized one thing, is that M is a great poet, the way he writes. And the song that you sang, the second to last one, is the beginning, is the part of the first scene of the gospel. And the way M gets you in is so beautiful. He starts talking. That is the beginning, the very first few lines. He said, well, I was walking with a friend. We're just having basically a leisurely day, strolling around, visiting beautiful gardens of, I guess, of big estates. They have beautiful gardens where you can go. And so we're just on a lark, you know. My friend said, oh, you know what? I know a really charming place somewhere around the Ganges, you know, and there's a holy man there. You know, so you want to go visit? He said, yeah, why not? You know, let's do it. So it starts out very nonchalant, you know, so they're just walking around, and you know something is coming. And so they go and walk over there, and they arrive there around dusk. You know, they come to the gate of the temple garden, and they go straight to Ramakrishna's room. So apparently his friend knew about it. M did not know about it. And they enter the room, and they find out it's filled with people. But as M says, there's deep silence. And the people are listening to Ramakrishna holding forth. He says there's deep silence, but he is speaking. And then he says, this charming man, that's what he calls him, this charming man, was talking there. And all at once I was riveted to the place, to the spot. He realized that this spot was where all holy places that he had probably visited, because that's what he is indicating, came together. And he couldn't move. And he realized that the people were, as he calls it, because he uses his words very carefully. He's a poet. M is a poet. He's a good writer. And he says they were drinking in his words. They weren't listening. They were drinking in his words. Now, drinking in somebody's words means that there's a thirst being quenched. That's what he felt. And I love that when you read it. You should read it. It's the first page almost, you know. So he's slowly setting it up. So he's first like, it's just a lackadaisical day, and then all at once, there is this moment where things change completely. And he says, I never wanted to move from this spot. Yet he decides with his friend to go and visit the gardens while it is already getting dark. And so they do go outside, and they start visiting the rest of the temple complex. The moment he steps out, and there again goes M in a beautiful way, he says this sweet music is wafting through the air, coming from the temple where the service is being held, and also from close to the Ganges. The way he writes about, you can feel the atmosphere of the evening. It's so beautiful. You can feel the music wafting by, the silence of the evening. You can smell the flowers almost. It is very, very beautiful. And the way he says it is true poetry. That to me, by the way, are the songs in the gospel. Because none of these songs I knew until I heard them today, and so beautifully sung. But for me, the music was in the poetry that M gives us, you know. Anyway, he comes back to Ramakrishna's room after having gone through the complex, and he finds the door closed. And outside is his maid, I think you would pronounce her name Brinde, is that right? Right. And he talks to her and he says, is the master in? She said, yeah. Has he been here for a while? He said, yeah, he's been here for a long time. And by the time the way he says it, you immediately know, oh my God, a lot has happened before we get in on the action, and we will never know about that, you know. He immediately sets the stage, you know. He tells you all these things. And then he says something that I find very interesting as a Westerner. He said, having been brought up with English manners, I realized that I shouldn't go in without permission. I don't know whether Indian people just kind of barge in or something like that, but that's what he's indicating. So, I'm sorry, I hope you don't feel offended by that, but that's what he's indicating. So he just asks the maid, and he asked another question. He said, does Ramakrishna read a lot of books? And she says, oh my, no. It's all on his tongue. And by that, he is immediately setting the stage also to show that he doesn't take his own literary gift, which is considerable in my estimation. It's beautiful. He sets it in an humble perspective there and says, I just came from college, he says. He just graduated from college. And you know how people from college, the cultural and literary elite think about men that don't read or cannot read, right? And the religion that they have seen long through, all that stuff that is for the dumb people, it's not for us. And he comes from that school. Some time ago I saw a bumper sticker that said, hire college students while they still know it all. And so, but he immediately takes a humble attitude towards his future master. And he realizes that here is somebody that is more than these scholarly stars that he grew up with in college. Let me make sure that I get some of the stuff in, and I won't make it too long, I promise. But he basically setting up there also that thing that we later on see in Vivekananda, this juxtaposition of modern education versus direct knowledge, which is what all the songs are about. They all talk about this direct knowledge, and they all, to me, but it is because of the translation, and I don't know Sanskrit, of course, but they all show the inadequacy of language, to indicate, but they all try to indicate that thing that it cannot be indicated. That's what the music is about, and the flowingness of the music. Yuri Menuhin, great violinist of the 20th century, one of the great artists in music, in Western music, said, it's probably about time that Western music starts to take note of Indian music. He said, it grows like crystals. That means that there's a natural tendency to spring up in a certain way. And it's very beautiful the way he says it. So there's the first juxtaposition that we see, because later on we find it in Vivekananda also, where Vivekananda also modern, educated, and he had an encyclopedic knowledge, said, what is all this stuff? We already talked about it, this thing with God, and mother, and he doesn't believe in it at first, So, M already in the first 2 pages talks about that and begins about that. Anyway, he asks the maid if he can go in. And she says, go right in, children, it's fine. Children, that's what he said, go right in, children, it's fine. And they go in, and it is kind of dark in the room, and Ramakrishna is alone. So after having been there where everybody is there, even though they're quiet, all at once there the master is alone. And the master begins immediately to ask questions like, where are you from? And what do you do? And at that time, M begins to see that the master's kind of distracted, kind of absent-minded, he feels, and immediately inserts, later on, I understood that this was ecstasy. But he didn't understand it at the time. Now, ecstasy, for Westerners, has a difficult ring to it. Just like the word bliss, that doesn't occur very often in Western language. We don't feel comfortable with that. I remember in the hippie days, they called them like people were blissed out, but that was not a good thing, actually. They were just on drugs, But that's how I know the word bliss, and it is not a good thing in a way. Anyway, so he realizes that the master is in ecstasy. He realized it later on. But the ecstasy is exactly what the song that I was given, and I will quickly read you the thing, which is a very different translation than what you said, but they're both approximations, so it makes sense. But he realized that bliss was what the master was all about. That means a direct, immediate, natural, organic understanding of that absolute that no intellectual, no rational computations can come close to. And as somebody said, you know, none of us here have had samadhi and stuff like that. Well, I'm not so sure, to be honest with you, because there's people who have smithereens of it, you know, that doesn't. And Ramakrishna also said that, you know, he didn't say, none of you are going to have it, it's just me, just the opposite. You know, he said, everybody can have it. That doesn't mean that I claim it, because that is not true. But there are certain, like fireflies, little things, and he talks about it later on in the gospel too. And I love that he is able to do that. Let me really quickly, because I talked about it, and then I promise I'll go. But in the first or the second page, when M comes outside and he hears the music, this is his description. That is my music in the gospel, okay? He said, so he hears the sweet music, and he says, the sounds traveled over the Ganges, floating away and losing themselves in the distance. The soft spring wind was blowing, laden with the fragrance of flowers. The moon had just appeared. It was as if nature and men together were preparing for the evening worship. That's the gospel. It's the second page. You know, that is so beautiful. That is so real quickly I will say what the song said, and so you know what I was talking about. But to me it is not even about the song, as you know. It is about the whole atmosphere, and it is so beautiful. Meditate, O my mind, on the Lord Hari, and Hari here stands for the absolute, I think. You know, it's one of the names of Vishnu, apparently. So the stainless one, pure spirit through and through. How peerless is the light that in him shines. In him shines, he's self-effulgent. How soul bewitching is his wondrous form. How soul bewitching, it's magic. How dear is he to all his devotees. Ever more beauteous in fresh blossoming love that shames the splendor of a million moons. Like lightning gleams the glory of his form, raising erect the hair for very joy. And as soon as Ramakrishna hears it, his hair does stand on end. And that is one of the things that happens naturally. You don't meditate on, I'm going to have my hair stand on end. You know, it happens. It's a natural thing, just like his ecstasy. Worship his feet in the lotus of your heart, with mind serene and eyes made radiant. With heavenly love, behold that matchless sight, caught in the spell of his love's ecstasy. Immerse yourself forevermore, O mind, in him who is pure knowledge and pure bliss. Thanks for